Welcome to this Gadgets for Families bonus episode, bonus topic, post show, depending on how you consume the content. We ran longer on the regular topic for today and actually had to bump some stuff to next week or the week after. But part of that's because we get talking about iPads and there's
Yeah,
just so much to talk
yeah,
about. And, it's not my favorite Apple device. It might be closer to my favorite Apple device after I use this new one for a while, but my watch still kind of is my favorite. But anyway, so thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, follow, all that kind of stuff. But what we want to talk about now is going to be a little bit different. We want
yeah,
to talk about good, bad tech. Okay. And so I'm going to put a disclaimer in here. We've always said that we don't try and tell parents how to parent. We're going to tell you what we do. We're going to give suggestions on how you can do certain things, but ultimately, it is up to you to decide how to work with your kids on this stuff. So, for example, we were talking about social media and the goods and bad of social media, which would tie right into this topic. And one of the things I said is the most important thing is that you sit down and get on the same page with your kids, right? That advice still holds. Whether you decide to let them have Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, WeChat, whatever the case may be, that's up to you as a parent. But you need to get on the same page with them. So there are some things that Jason and I have some very strong opinions that we believe every parent should follow. But there's a lot of areas where we're just going to say, hey, this is what we do. And that may or may not work for you. Today, though, we want to talk about something that's come up in the media. And Jason, maybe this is the time for you to bring up your comment. I know it's a little later in here, but maybe
yeah,
this is the time for you to bring up and talk about what the media does with some of these tech topics.
yeah. So you're right. I guess we should talk about this first because the media, and it's not just with tech. This is with everything, right? We see it now with politics. We see it now with all kind of controversies and stuff coming out of schools and policies and things like that with government. Tech is just another thing just thrown in the fire, and they always take a negative, like fear mongering approach to anything. Right? Nothing is ever regular, right? You don't see a news story where you see a child being bullied in school and they don't go regular child being bullied in school. No, it's always a special needs child or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that these things don't happen, but it just seems like the media attaches onto the negative aspects of any topic, right? It can't be
Yeah.
a man that got into a wreck. He has to be a disabled veteran that got beat up by the police or something like that. Nothing's ever regular.
It's
So
polarization,
a lot of the
right? So
yeah,
sorry, Jason, but it's this
yeah,
polarization piece that either it has to be a really bad person that something happened to or a really good person that something happened to, what we would call quote unquote
exactly.
normal in the middle. We are so desensitized to stuff that it seems like the media has to make everything more sensational than it really
Yes.
should be just to get clicks or views or likes or bring in the ad revenue or something like that. And so, unfortunately, this is, and we told you we were going to have lots of opinions. So, just if you don't want to hear our opinions, you should turn it off
Yeah,
right now.
yeah,
But we are so polarized. There's my version of good and my version of bad, and there's nothing in between. That's what our
yeah.
society is coming down to, right? And so the media just feeds into that. There's no gray area, no um, compromise. There's no your view can be different than mine, and that's okay. One,
Yeah.
it's my way or the highway, and that is the end of the story. There's end of
Yeah.
part of a rant, which I'm sure won't be the last one for this.
And again, like we said, we don't parent parents, but what we want you to do is see through all of that. We want you to see through the manipulation that the media uses because, bringing it back to the show, they use that with tech stories
Yep.
all the time. So Greg mentioned in the last show, in the first half of the show, about the AirPod, the AirTag being such an underrated device. And I think I agree with you. One, it is underrated. It is a great device, great piece of technology, reasonable price for some a company like Apple.
$25.
Yeah, for some really powerful and useful technology. But I think that people's introduction to that technology was all of the negativity and all of the fear
Yeah.
mongering that the media used, right? So and again, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the devices and stuff, but I think just from the very start, the AirTag was just so beaten down that some people just, when you hear AirTag, just like, companies, when you think about soda, you think about Coca Cola. When you think about an MP3 player, you think about an iPod, right? It's just
Yep.
those names are synonymous with that. So when you hear AirTag, now you immediately think this is how the ex-husband tracks his ex-wife. This is how the controlling boyfriend, you know what I mean? This is how some
Yeah.
bad actor uses. This is a tool that bad people use. Like when you hear spy camera, right?
Yeah.
You think spy camera, oh, this camera is used to spy on people. Well, no, it can be a little compact camera that you want to use to view stuff. But when you say spy camera, so when you hear AirTag now, that just it's always in the back of your head. So I think just from the start, the media beat that product up. So now most people just don't want to deal with it, or don't
Yeah.
want to bother with it, or don't want it around them. So
Yeah.
that's my little rant about that. But what we want to do with this conversation is try to get you to see through all of the negativity, because it's not just technology. It's like I said, politics, it's policies, it's sports teams, it's everything. See through the negativity and make your own
Yeah.
decisions about some of this technology and stuff, especially when it comes to AI,
Yeah.
because there is a lot of that, and a lot of people down talking AI that's not even AI, right? We
Yep.
mentioned it before. They kind of just bunch everything in and just call it AI, and a lot of it is not out to spy on you or to replace jobs or to replace
Yeah.
humanity. A lot of it is just something cool to do, a cool little tool to help you
Yeah.
along with some task or something like that. But enough about that.
Yeah.
So we can jump into it, Greg.
Yeah. Here's the last thing wrapping up on the AirTags. You heard all the stalking stories, but unless you
Yeah.
follow tech stuff, you don't hear all of the people that found their luggage that the airlines lost because they had an AirTag in it, and they were able to tell the airline where it was and get it back. And so you don't hear, they're always going to sensationalize the bad stuff and marginalize the good stuff because the good stuff is considered boring or
Yep.
whatever. So,
It's not
Jason,
interesting enough.
there's kind of two things that came out of this. One is this general thing about AI is going to take away everybody's jobs. Okay. And it's going to replace human beings. And this is not even the people that go clear to the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, right? That the AI is going to rise
Yeah,
up, or
Skynet. You're
iRobot,
right.
right? And going to destroy the world. But put all of that stuff aside, because that's not what we're going to go. So there's this concern about AI replacing jobs. And there is valid concern, right? But I don't think it's for the reasons like they're saying, well, people are going to, the AI is the problem. And we'll get into this a little bit. I don't think it's the AI that is the problem. It's how the AI is used. And that kind
Yeah.
of gets down to the crux of what we want to talk about. But one of the specific things that came out of Apple's presentation, and I'm going to be very, very specific, and I'm going to disagree a little bit with some of the folks that I've heard talk about this, is the ability that they have to generate images of other people and
Yeah.
cartoon like images. One of the examples they used was be able to send your mom a AI generated cartoon of your mom with a cape and say you're my superhero, right?
Yeah.
Which super 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 cool in my opinion. And Apple's gone on the bandwagon and talked about how this is really cool, it's fun, we're trying to be the hip cool ones. People have been able to do this stuff on Android and using other apps for a very very long time. And then you hear the other side of this, and I think some of the media that I've heard talk about this are doing it just to get the clicks. Others I think
Yeah.
have some legitimate concerns. I'm just going to tell you kind of where this comes. I've got 3 grandkids. They're going to be going to school. They're going to be exposed to all kinds of things that they are not exposed to at home. Right. So my oldest is going into kindergarten. She's then going to continue on. Look, my wife has worked in an elementary school in a fairly conservative town for 7+ years and has gotten exposed to everything that Jason sees in Houston school
Yeah.
districts. Right. I mean, there's not a difference. You're going to
Yeah.
get exposed
Kids,
to all
kids
of
are
this stuff.
kids.
Correct.
Right.
So going into this with this image generation stuff is the concern that once kids have phones and have this kind of technology, it's going to be used to bully, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be used to make fun of, bully, make people feel bad. No different than social media, right? I mean, same thing with social
Yeah.
media accounts, which is why Jason and I are such advocates of you being deliberate about your kids with social media and deliberate with your kids in technology in general, right? So if we think about AI's ability to take away people's jobs, AI's ability to be used to bully, right? And then think about the AirTags, right? It's got the potential for some super negative stuff, stalking, all of those kinds of things. Those concerns are all valid. I mean, trust me, and my oldest is a granddaughter, and I get a little more worried about my daughters, right? I get, daughters, granddaughters. There's a little bit of Papa Bear wants to protect
Yeah.
those, maybe a little more than he does the sons and the grandsons. But I'm going to be concerned about this in general. But my problem is that the question came up: should Apple have built that image generation technology? Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the question I posed to Jason when I got thinking about this: is should a tech company not develop a product or service because it could potentially be used for bad stuff? That's the
Yeah.
question.
I think that's a horrible way to think about anything, to approach the future, right? The development of new technologies and health technologies, any kind of technology. I mean, even if we're talking about an axe, right, which is still technology. At one point in history, many, many years ago, that was cutting edge technology. Boom. I didn't mean it being that pun. But
Dad joke, grandpa
you know,
joke.
there yeah, there there are there are axe murderers, right? But the axe was built to make people's lives better. It was
Hmm.
made to clear land and to build structures, beautiful structures and homes and stuff like that. Are there always going to be axe murderers? Yes. So when we talk about things, should companies do things because bad people are going to do things with them? I think that's a horrible line of thinking. Um, do the companies have some responsibility to protect people or to put in measures and stuff to protect people better and stuff um, from bad people or from bad actors that'll do nefarious things with their products and their services and their devices? Yes, they do have some responsibility to protect people from it. Whether that be warning messages or other software and technology to prevent it from being misused. Yes, that's their responsibility. But I don't think any company should approach any kind of technology, any kind of software, any kind of innovation with the idea that maybe we shouldn't do this because it's going to hurt people or possibly be used for
Right.
the wrong thing. So
Yeah.
how
Uh,
do you feel about that? Do you think that they should develop with that in mind? Should we be doing this, or should they just do it and then work on ways to protect people from
yeah. If you've got an idea, product or service, and you want to bring it to the market, and the only thing it could ever
it?
be used for is bad, yeah,
Yeah,
probably shouldn't do it, right? But there are very, very, very few things that would fall in. I was trying to think of an example, and the only thing that really came to mind was nuclear weapons, right?
yeah. That's what I
Nuke,
thought. The original one, not the
yeah,
hydrogen bombs. That was the way to fix all the
yeah,
bad things with the nuclear one. But yeah,
yeah,
I agree with you. That was my
yeah.
first thought. Was that original atom bomb?
And then I remembered,
I mean,
the movie Armageddon, right? That finally the movie Armageddon and the movie The Core were the only thing that could save us in those two
was that
apocalyptic
right?
scenarios were the very weapons of mass destruction we had created. But that's not what we're talking about here. And I know Jason used the example of the axe, but what we're talking about things, let's stick to the tech for just a minute, right? Think
Yeah.
about the internet. Should we not have the internet because people can use it to stalk? They can put pornography. They can do revenge things. They can do scams, right? They can do
Yeah,
all of those
stealing and
kinds of things
draining people's
on.
accounts, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Those are horrible, horrible things that can be done. But think back to the pandemic and what we would have done in the pandemic without the internet. Number one, way more people would have died, right? Because there would have just been no way to deal with the pandemic without the internet and everything that's connected to it. And then two, the mental state of society in general went down with the pandemic,
Uh,
right? I mean, more
even
depression,
so,
more
it did.
anxiety, all of those kinds of things. And it would have been how many times worse without Zoom or Teams or
Yeah.
FaceTime or whatever the case may be. So there's one. Email is another one, right? Think about, I mean, I
Yeah.
know we hate our mailboxes, but
Yeah.
email is another one of those things. Should it have never been developed because you could scam people and send bad emails? Messaging, same problem. And I think you added cameras, right? So,
Yes.
or should we not have cameras because you can take pictures of people, right? I mean, when I
Yeah.
was a scout leader, one of the things was not allowing cameras into restrooms, right? Okay, so does that mean we should
Right.
never have cameras at scout camp? No, because every parent wants to see what were my kids doing at scout camp, right? How did it go?
Yeah.
What did they
Yeah.
learn? You know, we had a few years ago, Karen and I were asked to help chaperone taking all of the youth of our church stake, which was a couple hundred youth or so, back on a church history tour. And there was this
Hmm.
big, huge debate because if you let kids take cell phones, they're going to use them and they're going to use them for good and they're going to use them for dumb stuff too, right? And there was
Yeah.
this big debate on should we even allow the cell phones to go? And there
Yeah.
were a lot of arguments for this. And finally, I said, look, I said, number one, if we ban them, they're going to get stuffed in the bottom of their suitcases and they're going to go anyway. And then I
Yeah.
said, number two, and this is kind of leads into where I stand with all of this kind of stuff. Number two, if we allow them to take them, we have an opportunity to teach them appropriate use
Right.
of their cell
Mhm.
phones, right? They can use them to communicate to their parents. They can use them to take pictures and have all of those memories. They can use them to communicate with their friends that are on the same trip, but part of a different group on a different part of the
Right.
tours and stuff, right? And as leaders, we have a way to communicate with everybody that's in our group. And then we have an opportunity where we're at a meeting or a site that's considered sacred to be able to say, "Hey everybody, go ahead and take your pictures and then we're going to put our
Mhm.
phones away for a bit because now is the time to put our phones away." And um, that's where we ended up landing. The leader that got the ultimate decision on that, he was a good friend of mine, and I'd served in church with him for quite a while, and he agreed with me, and that's the way it went. And we didn't have a single problem with
Yeah.
kids misusing technology. Right. I mean, even today, I walked into the temple, and when we go to the temple, we take other people's ancestors' names into the temple to do work for them,
Hmm.
and you go through on family search, which is another thing that came from the internet, connecting all of these families and learning about families and stuff like that. But we don't have a printer right now. I'm not going to have a printer in the RV. And so, but what I do is I can take my phone in and I have a QR code, and they scan the QR code at the desk at the temple and they print the names and cut them out for me. And then I just power my phone off and put it in my pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another cool technology, holding my thumb up and getting bubbles on the camera. But anyway, that's another, right? The temple is not a place for technology. You don't talk on the phone in the temple. You don't
Right.
message in the temple. Any of that kind of stuff. It's just not necessary. But I could use the tech to be able to
Yeah.
facilitate being able to do stuff. So that's where I stand. You asked where I stand on this kind of stuff. I don't believe the things in and of themselves are the problem. I think it's how they get used. And now I'm going to alienate some parents that may be listening to this, but I believe when we talk about kids bullying, let's just use that image generation stuff. If you're going to go
Yeah.
install iOS 18 on a high school kid's phone, and there's this new technology where they can manipulate the images and all that kind of stuff and maybe do some hurtful things. Same thing with social media, that kind of stuff. If you're going to allow that kind of technology onto your kid's phone, it's up to you whether you do or not, right? It's up to you whether you get them a phone. But if you are
Yeah.
going to allow that kind of technology into their life, I believe it's your responsibility as a parent to have the conversation with them
Yeah.
and help them understand why certain things are okay and why they're not. There are tons of stories out there where kids are bullying other kids and they don't think it's a big deal. And I do appreciate the stories I see when dad goes, no, 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 no. You're going to learn why this
Yeah.
is a big deal. Dad, you're overreacting. No, actually, I'm really not. And I apologize that I didn't teach you this earlier, but now we're going to learn this lesson, right? That
Yeah.
these kinds of things are not okay. So I firmly believe Apple should put all the protections and all of the guidelines around protecting people's jobs, right? I mean, let's face it, this kind of artwork that it's talking about generating is not going to put artists out of business, right?
It's
It's
not.
just not.
It's really not nice. Yeah.
No, it's
And
it's not.
it's
It's supposed to be that, hey, Jason, this is what I'm thinking about you today, and it's got, it's got a big long Pinocchio nose on it because you said you weren't going to install the betas and you told me you did, right? So liar, liar,
right,
pants on
right.
fire kind of thing. Fun between
Yeah.
friends. Yes, it can be used for bad things. So Apple should put the protections in place. Apple should make sure that parents are approving usage. And in my opinion, Apple has put in
Yep.
plenty of tools for parents that are willing to put in the work to be able to educate, restrict, and monitor usage of
Yeah.
Apple's stuff. So that's
Yeah.
that's where I fall on this.
And going back to what you said about the camp trip and all of that, and whether or not they allow phones, I think parents y'all ended up not having an issue because y'all allowed the kids to bring their devices, and y'all guided them through how to use them and all of that. This is what parents should be doing, and not only preparing them for how they should be using the devices and the things that they should be doing. You got to prepare them for both sides. Prepare them for what happens if some of their classmates are doing the things to them. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
when you're a parent and you raise children at all ages, at some point you're raising little bullies. And then at some point you're raising the kids that are getting bullied too.
Yeah.
So you have to prepare them for both sides of that with the technology. So this is what happens when someone sends you these type of pictures, because I have a 13-year-old boy and I have to have this conversation on almost a weekly basis about what do you do when you receive inappropriate material from your friends who are other 13-year-old boys. Now, not to go into details about that, the parents, you know what 13-year-old boys think about, and you know what they want to see and look at. What do you do when you receive that? Back to our conversation. Well, what do you do when you start receiving these pictures and stuff about you inappropriate, or you feel that you're being bullied, or they're making fun of you and stuff like that? Take the opportunity to teach them and guide them through both sides of that situation, not just I don't want you doing this and disabling it on the phone or disabling
Right.
that feature or whatever. Allow them to use it and let them know the good and the bad. That way, like Greg just mentioned, now you'll see not only why not to do something, but you'll have that opportunity to explain why that's a big deal and how much trouble you can get into,
Yeah.
and the outcomes and stuff with that. So yeah, prepare your kid to be a bully and to get bullied, and yeah, I think that'll help out with this technology.
And how to deal with the situation. So part of this is about your relationship with your
Yeah.
kids too, right? This is not a parenting
Yes.
class, but if you've had the conversation up front that says, hey, this is how we handle that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden they get their first inappropriate image sent to them, you want them to feel comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, I got this. Can you help me
Yes.
figure out how to appropriately deal with this? And the first reaction that most parents that don't want their kids seeing that kind of stuff is going to have is, on a Christmas Story, when Ralphie drops the F-bomb and gets his mouth washed out with soap, and then he sells out his best buddy, even though it is his dad that he heard it from, and it was Schwartz. And the next thing, he's got the soap back in his mouth, and his mom's on the phone with Schwartz's mom saying, "Do you know what your son said? My son said today."
Yeah.
And then you hear him going, "Mama, what did I do, Mama?"
Yeah.
That's not the reaction that's good with this kind of stuff. You've got to be able to talk this through and say, hey, everybody makes their choices, right? Everybody has to have their agency to decide what's right and what's wrong for them, regardless of what we know to be right and what we know to be wrong, right? Everybody has to make those decisions for themselves. That includes parents, and parents shockingly enough, it's going to include your kids, right? You're going to have to let
Yeah.
them make some of these decisions. I always used to use the example of if I lock down every single thing I can on my internet and never have a
Yeah.
conversation about what's locked down and what's not, the first time they get out on cellular or they get to somebody else's network that's not locked down and get to a site, they don't know what to do with that. And you got to teach that kind of stuff, and you got to
Right.
have that kind of relationship so that they're willing to talk to you about that stuff. And that's not the point of what we're talking about today, right? Apple, I think, has done a good job. I think, Jason, you would agree with me. We've spent a lot of time talking
I think
about
so.
restrictions and screen time and all this kind of stuff. I don't think we should be putting any technology company in the position of saying, don't develop the tech that's potentially world changing just because it could be used for bad things. Now, I want to say a couple of things here, and I don't know what kind of chords I'm going to strike, but there is
Hmm.
evidence that some of the social media companies have deliberately continued to do things to addict people, to pull in younger
Yep.
generations, right? To do that kind of stuff. I am in no way advocating that you do any of those. That is just not right. I mean, even
Yep.
games with micro in-app purchases are playing on psychology, right? They're knowing that they can get you hooked and be willing to spend money and do this kind of stuff. And so there's got to be restrictions
Yep.
around that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about us saying, hey, Apple, do not allow MMS, do not allow pictures to be sent via iMessage because you could get some inappropriate pictures.
Yeah.
That's not, there's so many good things that can be done. And if we will teach kids and adults and ourselves how to appropriately use things, and then, like you said, how to deal with when you're tempted to misuse it or when it gets misused on you, right? Then I think we're better off to have this stuff than we are to just say, no, never develop it in the first place because it's going to hurt my kid, right? I don't think we can live in that kind of a world. I mean, we would be back in the Stone Age.
Yeah. Yeah. And we keep saying we don't parent parents. We're not talking down on anyone. Greg seen me grow a lot as a parent. Like he mentions um, about locking down the internet and stuff. With my oldest son, that was my approach. I was a much younger father. I wanted to protect him, or so I thought I was protecting him from all of that type of stuff. And I've grown since then. Greg, like I said, Greg's known me for years now, and I have a totally different approach when it comes to my younger children than I did with him, right? And again, I'm a pretty young grandfather, which shows you which shows you how locking down the internet worked out. Blocking the porn sites at the router level, and making sure his phone is like fully restricted and stuff like that. Where we fast forward all of these years, I have screen time and stuff, and my middle son doesn't have nearly as many restrictions as my older son did. So I'm saying that not to make it seem like we're down talking parents or parents who don't use this or doing things the wrong way. No, everyone's parenting their child the best way that they should. You know your child better than anyone. If you feel that works for you guys and your household, then by all means continue doing it. But what we want to do is share these examples um, that we use when it comes to
Right.
managing our family's tech and devices and stuff to just kind of give you an idea of well, maybe there is a way, and maybe instead of hearing AI and just totally in my head like I don't want to deal with that, it's taking jobs and it's making children turning children into predators. No, that's not what we're saying at all. There's a better way to use this stuff. There's
Yeah.
a better way, and it takes more of an effort from your parents, from the family, from the mom and dad, or just from the parents. Period. I used to say when I
Grandpas.
coached little league, yeah, grandpas too get involved. I would say all the time when I coached little league, this is more than a commitment from just the kids. You're not just bringing your kids and dropping them off and letting them run up and down the football field or the baseball field. This is a commitment. We need a commitment from the parents too.
Yeah.
You're a part of the team. You know what I mean? So technology doesn't just require a commitment from the manufacturer, from Apple, to put in all of these guidelines to protect us. your commitment as a parent from having these devices is to participate a little more and be deliberate about protecting your children and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So again, I don't want to get too deep and too philosophical, but I'm saying it just to say we're not coming down on anyone.
Yep.
You're doing a good job as a parent. Just when it comes to technology, we all need to play our role with the technology.
So our recommendation number one, and Jason can say if he disagrees with these though, is to make sure that you have the relationship with your kids so that you can
Yeah.
have these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Recommendation number two is to not go with the flow, right? Don't go on the sensational side of stuff or the not a big deal side of stuff, right? Because odds are the best place to be is going to be somewhere in between. And in order for you to figure out what that is in between, you're going to have to do some work because the media is not going to tell you anything other than the sensational or the, one side or the other, right? They're not going to fall on the middle of this. And you might have to do some research and dig in to understand both sides and to
Yeah.
figure out, is there a happy medium that works for me and my family? If the answer is yes, then take advantage of the tools that have been given you to manage that medium. If the answer is no, take advantage of the tools that says, nope, we're going to shut this off. So that's recommendation number one, conversations, relationship with your kids. Number two is do the work so that you know where you think you need to be. And then you refer back to number one and you sit down and have a conversation and say, hey, I know you really, really want to get to this. You want to get this new. Well, I don't have TikTok, so I'll just use that one. I know you really want to get on TikTok because your friends are all on there. They're sending you stuff. And you can just say, hey, I'm just not comfortable with that right now, and maybe I don't know enough and you can help me and we can do some research together and figure it out, but right now I'm just not comfortable with it. So the answer is going to be no until we can kind of work through this. I just had this
Yeah.
conversation about a topic I won't get into. Maybe I'll tell Jason what it is later with my 19-year-old son, that there was something I wanted to do. He was excited. I wanted to do for him. He was excited for this, but there was this nagging thing in the back of my head about how good that thing could go or how bad, right? Absolutely horrible, life ruining that particular topic could be. And so we had 4 or 5 real deep conversations about this. He did some research. I did some research. We talked about the potential negatives of all this kind of stuff. And eventually we worked through and I ended up doing it. I was still a little bit hesitant doing it, right? As the parent going, am I doing the right thing? But he's 19. He's old enough to make some of these decisions on his own. And I felt like we had all the conversations that we needed to have to be able to move forward with it. And I feel confident he was being honest with me about how he was going to handle the stuff. Yeah, you've got to do those two things. You've got to have the relationship and you've got to do the work.
Your conversation, if the situation goes like this, you tell your son, your daughter, your child, you say, hey, give me your phone. I need to check something. Or you say, what's your passcode to your device? Why do you need my passcode? If that's an argument right there, then definitely you should get back to basics and you need to reconsider your whole relationship as far as technology and things like that. Because if the argument starts at the point of saying, what's your passcode? Yeah, definitely reevaluate that whole situation involving tech. If it's a situation like my son and my wife, she says, hey, what's your passcode? You changed your passcode. What's your passcode? Oh, it's 1238. I had to change it because my classmate was looking over my shoulder and saw, oh, I had to change my password for this because he changes his password a lot. Now, once he gets all of his passwords into the password app, he'll be able to remember that. But he changes passwords a lot, and it's never an argument. It's never an issue when it comes to giving that stuff up. That's the main thing. Have that relationship when it comes to technology. If they do receive some inappropriate material and they come to you and you immediately, why do you have that on your phone, or why are you looking at things like that? And again, I'm not judging. I went down that road. Again, Greg can attest. I've grown as a parent. Now I have those conversations versus immediately, what's that website? Taking it to the router and putting it on the block list.
Yeah.
And I've grown a lot since then. So I'm not down talking to you, but if that's the reaction that you're getting when you say, hey, let's talk about this, or hey, we need to limit your time on TikTok, or we need to limit your time on Instagram. If that's a major argument from the start, then yeah, reevaluate from
Yeah.
the ground up on how your family handles technology and stuff.
Do the work. It's not easy. So even with my
It's not.
grandkids, with the limited stuff that they have, it's hard for me to get them to understand why there's certain things we don't want them to do, or why they can't spend
Right.
12 hours a day on their tablets, right? Why we're saying now is tablet time. But I'm doing things with my grandkids different than I did with my own kids, right? I mean, partially because they have technology from day one. My kids did not, right? And so, but they just know that if grandpa says, hey, it's time for outside time and time to put away our screens or whatever the case may be, got to
Yeah.
build up that relationship. Now it's pretty easy. There's 6, 5, and or 5, 4, and 2, right? And they're 15, 13, and 11. We'll see how easy it is for grandpa to be able to do that, right? But
that's
it
what
is more work.
downtime comes in.
Yeah, it's way more
It's
work.
more work. You're right about that, and it's boring to some people, right? Some
Yeah.
people don't want to read about technology. Their daughter or their child comes to them and say, "Mom, I want an AirTag," or "How do I use AirDrop?" Because AirDrop is another piece of technology that
Yeah.
got villainized really early on, and now everyone uses AirDrop. It's so great. I want to start using this. How do I use this? Your average parent, they don't want to go to
Yeah.
forums and instructions and look at YouTube videos on how to use stuff just so they can manage it better for their children. So we understand that we love it, but technology is boring to a lot of people out there,
Yeah.
right? If it doesn't
Well,
work exactly the way that they're advertising it, it's useless to them, you know?
even if you're thinking to yourself, I'm a young parent, but I'm comfortable with all the technology we have today. You will get to the point where your kids are more comfortable with the technology that you go, huh? What? But what? Right? Whether it's holograms in the future or, I mean, things like the Vision Pro is going to introduce a whole set of complications, right? Just,
Yeah.
you're going to get to that point. So, yeah. So we probably should wrap this up. We're hitting almost 3 hours of recording time today, but the thing is, it's not the thing itself, my opinion. It is not the thing
Yeah.
itself that's good or bad. It's how it's used. And it's going to be used for good and it's going to be used for bad. It's just the way the world is.
Yeah.
Our job for anybody we can influence, whether it be our clients, our kids, our grandkids, our families, those in our work, whatever the case may be, you're in that kind of a position to influence this stuff. Your job should be to try and influence people to help them understand these are the bad ways it could be used. These are the good ways it can be used. And this is why we want to go in this direction. That is not the responsibility of people creating services and products, in my opinion. Yes, they should put guardrails around it. Yes, they should do all they can to give us the tools to use it properly. I mean, the state of Utah passed a law that says you have to have parental permission to do social media for anybody under 13 or 16. And there's a lot of studies that say that age needs to go up and up and up, right? Because it's just causing so many issues.
I think so.
So some of the companies have
yeah.
complied with that. You can sign up at this age, and a whole bunch of them are getting sued by Utah and a bunch of other states right now because they just didn't do it, right? They're failing not in the creation of the social media technology, but they're failing in implementing the tools that governments or others have insisted are necessary to protect, right? And to allow it to be
Yeah.
used more for good and less for bad. It's never no bad, it's just less for bad. So that's where I stand on this. It is our job. And that's one of the things that Jason and I always want to try and do is educate y'all, give you information, help you with resources so that you can think through this stuff and decide, okay, this is what's right for me, my family, and my situation.
So the last thing before we wrap up, I wanted to include, so we were talking about how to properly teach people is nothing is all or nothing. You get what I'm saying? A new feature comes out, let's say Apple Intelligent. You don't have to take advantage of all the features and all the aspects of this new technology that comes out, right? Showing your children or parents or whoever you're that's in your device family, how to integrate that and use those aspects of the technology in your life. Figuring out the best way to integrate that technology into your life the best way possible. It's probably the best approach to take with anything, right? Is a gradual kind of measured approach to any technology. For example, we use um, AirDrop, right? It came out, it was wonderful, right? We thought it was going to be the way of the future, and it is. Perverts were doing things on the bus and public transit, airdropping inappropriate materials, and Apple says, wait, let's step back. How do we show people how to protect themselves better? And
Yep.
they re-engineered it into a way to where it's initiated by you. It's initiated by the person who wants to receive whatever information or something like that. That's exactly what Greg was just saying. It's not on Apple to protect you from the technology, but they're required to put their guardrails and things on it to make sure that it's not being used in a way that's going to be damaging to anyone else.
Yeah, and
But back to
Jason,
AirDrop, if you didn't want to use it for,
Yep.
I'm sorry, go ahead. If
no,
you didn't want to use it for photos and things like that, you have the ability to not use it, but still be able to share contact information if you
Yep.
wanted to send somebody. You have to send a document. Nothing's all or it's not all or nothing with this tech. Use it in the way that works best for your
Yep.
family. Would be the best way to handle it.
And that's a
But
really
go
good
ahead, Greg, what were
example
you saying?
because AirDrop, I just used AirDrop to get the photos that we set as wallpaper on all three of the kids' iPads,
Yeah.
right? And on
Yeah.
all three of them, it was off, right?
Yeah.
Off by
By
default.
default.
That's option one. Option two is only people in your contacts, so you have control over who's in your
Another
contacts.
way, yep.
And option three is everyone for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it
And that's it.
automatically defaults back to what you had it on before. You cannot, in that case, turn it on for everyone forever
All the time.
and do that once so you can get that one thing from somebody you're interacting with right then and there and forget to turn it back and 3 days later be on the bus and get material you don't want. Apple put the tools in place. You just have to know how to use them.
Yeah.
That's a really good example. All right.
So, yeah, that was all I had. I know, like you said, we're running long, but I think it was a good conversation. And let's keep the conversation going, guys. Jump in the comments and let us know. Send us messages, send us emails. Let us know how you're handling or how you're preparing your family and your kids for this new AI, this AI future that we're staring at.
And how do you deal with this philosophical stuff? Because AI will not be the last time we have to have this conversation. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us here at Gadgets for Families. We appreciate it. Hit that subscribe, follow, all of that kind of stuff. Share this with others. And we look forward to talking to you either in the comments or next week. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. See you.